Hailing from the Jersey Shore and raised as athletes, the Airey Bros have always shared a passion for physical culture, athletic performance, and human optimization, always striving to be the strongest versions of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Along the way, they've met some pretty amazing humans and have had some pretty epic adventures. The intention of Airey Bros Radio is to showcase these amazing people and the impact that they've had on them, and to share tips, tricks, and hacks so that you can win each day, every day.
You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
It really is just physical freedom. Like, that's the best shot that you've got. You have these kind of big dials that you can manipulate. You got exercise over here. You got what goes in your face over here. And maybe as a third one, you got like what time you go to bed at night. Somebody has the nuts to get here. They found us and they like want to be here. Let them in. Oh man, I got thoughts all day. Shop around a little bit because there's lots of places doing it in lots of different ways. You do have to pay homage to what's come before you. And there's got to be a through line from where the thing started to where it's going. And it has to make sense. You open up the physiology textbook and it tells you shouldn't be able to have a singular athlete that can express all these things that well. And it's like, well, we got a whole field of them. This is Adrian Bozman, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio.
Yeah, how have you been adjusting to the humidity in the South?
You know, I'm not going to lie, the Canadian in me is offended by the summer in the South, but you know, this is the second summer out here and I'm getting a little bit more used to it. I don't know that it's ever going to feel normal, but that's okay. I can deal with a couple months of that. I mean, the fall is so beautiful. The spring is so beautiful. And honestly, I don't mind the winter either. Yeah. It's really pretty mild. So yeah, no big deal. I can deal with a couple of months of sweat and thick. Yeah.
So are you getting your music fixed down there? Or is that, you get down with the country music too? Or?
A little bit. And man, I'll tell you, Nashville's all over the map. You know, like I think country music is what it's kind of obviously has a name for, but there's a lot going on here beyond that, but not as much. You know, this year in particular was pretty hairy with work and, you know, just kind of like Dave getting fired and the change in responsibility and stuff like that. Like it was really kind of a head down year in that regard. So I didn't get a chance to get out as much as I'd like. So that's like on the horizon now, which is exciting.
Talk a little bit more about that, but since you brought it up, it's a good segue. You know, last time we talked, the world was going sideways. And
yes,
you were our first COVID interview. You were our
really?
First interview on Zoom.
Oh yeah. Man,
we went. You know, Jimmy will tell you, we were basically got the boot from the radio station. You know, before we had you on, you know, we were walking out and, you know, Jimmy said something about, you know, normal or whatever. And I just turned to him deadpan and said, bro, we are never going back to normal and we are never coming back to this studio again. And
good for you.
Lo and behold, we have never been back in that studio. Yep. So
and you probably don't miss it, right? I mean, it was like the right thing to do was to go a different direction, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we always tried to focus on the gratitude for the last 2 years and yeah. what we thought might've been the end actually just kind of jumped off having conversations with people like you, James Fitzgerald, Mark Bell, like, you know, and then obviously wow. I went kind of full retard on the whole conspiracy scamdemic thing. And so we had a lot of people, like we had Del Bigtree on.
Sam Tripoli.
Sam Tripoli, you know, we had like, so it opened up.
What are you guys doing with a scrub like me? This is, I mean,
well, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, our roots is fitness. And, you know, we know that you were a big part of the community before, and you know, probably even a bigger part of the community and the games and that sort of stuff. And so when you know, Savon was mentioning you and I heard you on his podcast in I think it was in the thrust of everything that was going on, I said to Jimmy, I said we should obviously let him get some sleep once the smoke settles, but let's see if
I appreciate that
wants to come back on. So yeah, I mean, here we are and we've got you back and we're super stoked to kind of pick your brain a little bit about, you know, some more fitness stuff, but definitely want to hear about, you know, what your new role was like and how, if you put pressure on yourself or if you felt pressure and living up to some of those expectations, and how you think it all kind of worked out and played out. And I'm sure you have a list of things to go off of and work on for next year, and maybe even probably started thinking about planning some
Yeah.
stuff for already.
Oh yeah. All of that is true. Yes.
When you got the call, I mean, what was that like? Did you have an idea things were trending in that direction, or was it a surprise to you, or did you have to maybe mull it over, or were you just like, let's do it?
Well, I guess kind of different things unfolded in different ways. So it was very surprising that Dave got fired. That was a big surprise to all of us. And really sudden. I mean, I was sitting right over there on my couch. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I think, and I got a text, and it was a group text with me and Dave and a couple other people. And he said, "Hey, it's been a good ride. I just got fired." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And so I texted him on the side and I said, like, that's a stupid joke, man. Like, don't joke around about that. And he's like, "No, it's not a joke." And so I called him immediately, and it was busy. You know, he had a million people calling him, I'm sure. Anyway, so yeah, it was really sudden when that whole thing came down. And it was the beginning of the season. It was supposed to be a season where we'd kind of gotten our feet back under us post-pandemic, and it was going to be kind of like a return to business as usual. But obviously that's not the case when you got key leadership that gets removed. So in that regard, it was like a really big surprise. As far as like, okay, when it started unfolding and it became clear that I was going to have a bigger hand in the games, that felt natural in the sense that I've been around the games a long time. And, my role has kind of overlapped into different areas in that, I guess, domain. So in that way, it was like, yeah, I feel confident that I can handle that responsibility, but it was not at all expected that it was going to happen in that way. So it's kind of weird in that sense, because on the one hand, it's like, man, never in a million years did I expect that. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, I feel like I am the most qualified person to take the reign. So it was kind of a strange thing to navigate. And then you you muddle all the waters with, Dave's my friend. He's been my boss for 15 years. Like, there's a lot of history there. So yeah, it was tricky to navigate.
And I think even maybe backing up a little bit, even before that, your position changed and everyone's position changed prior, the last time we talked to you, and Greg was out and everything was kind of shifting, and then there was a new owner, and then the new owner was out, and everything was constantly changing. How was your role changed? Were you still with because I think you were in charge of the training programs or the
Oh, good memory.
Yeah, so in charge of training programs. What's your role now, and how has that changed since the last time we talked to you?
Yes. So if we go back in time a little bit to 2020, the world's shutting down with COVID. Things are getting weird. Greg gets bought out from the company, so he's no longer the owner. New ownership takes over. At that time, I was working in the education department, working to put out all the online training that we had. And with new ownership came a little bit more direction as far as, job descriptions and things like that. CrossFit's always been a pretty small company, and coming with that, for better or worse, in my opinion, it was what made it a lot of fun, was that many of us had jobs that they weren't like really well defined. You kind of had a lot of overlap with a lot of different things. But with that new ownership, it was like, okay, as things are moving forward, you're going to have to kind of pick and choose a more streamlined role. And so what was offered to me by Dave was a full-time role with the games department. And up until that point, I'd worked for the CrossFit Games, obviously, since 2008, but it was seasonally. It was in addition to other responsibilities I had. And this was the first time that it was going to be, okay, games is the focus and everything else is going to be offloaded to other people. So that was unique. And that took us through, that was the end of 2020. I had that transition. And by the beginning of 2021, I think it was late January, early February 2021, I transitioned to the games team full-time. And so we had the 2021 season with that structure. And then the 2022 season, like I said, was supposed to be kind of this, hey, great, we got a good lap under our belts coming out of, really restrictive COVID stuff. 2022, we should be able to build on that. And then boom, we get sidelined by the news that Dave's no longer with the team. So yeah.
No, is Dave's back with the team now?
That's
correct?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a much different role. He's working with affiliates, and doing a lot more consultation with that side of the house. So yeah, very different.
And are you going to be in charge of the 2023 games?
As far as I know, that is the plan. So we'll see. That's again, it's one of those things that's kind of strange to navigate, you know. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, so far.
With that said, along the years, but you said, was it 15 years you said you've been involved with the games?
Yeah. So I started working for CrossFit. The first time they ever paid me to show up was in 2007. And then I started working the CrossFit Games in 2008.
Okay. And in that time that you've been involved with the games and all aspects with the open and all those sorts of things, did you have like a marble journal book, where you had been like, maybe like, if I ever had to do this, or if I ever get the opportunity to do this, these are like workouts that I'm designing, or when you got the idea where you're like, oh, I need to get to work?
It was a bit of both. I mean, you guys, I think you're similar in the sense that you're physical culture junkies. Like, I don't know you guys that well, but just kind of reading between the lines, I think it's pretty obvious that you have like this niche appreciation for kind of the oddball physical culture underpinnings of things. And I think I have very similar leanings, maybe not exactly the same expression of it, but you know, like I've always had an interest in kind of obscure sports and, you know, base sports around the world. You know, like every culture has a foot race, every culture has a wrestling kind of expression, every culture has a weightlifting and throwing expression. Like, that's just human beings being human beings. And through that, I've had a lot of ideas that I thought would be cool to do at the games, but they weren't written down anywhere. They weren't like codified. They were just kind of concepts. And there's some concepts that I've spoken with friends of mine and things like that, that kind of just like on a, man, wouldn't it be fun to do this kind of way, but nothing more serious than that. And so when I got handed the reins, it was like, oh, wow, maybe I should go back in the old brain archive and take a look at some of these things that I've kind of spoken about in jest and see if they could actually have some utility in a legitimate test of fitness. So yeah, nothing seriously written down like that, but a lot of ideas that have been bouncing around for a long time.
Okay, I got two for you there. One, I think, yeah, because you were the first one we talked to when we went on to Zoom and stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard of the motivation factor.
Dude, yeah, I was going to say, you guys recommended that last time,
Okay,
and I have since recommended that to, like, I don't know how many people, and even just recently, actually, that came up again. Yeah, that's a great documentary.
Well,
Yeah,
his fasting documentary like changed my life.
Which one is that? I don't know if I know that one.
It's called Fasting. It's by that dude Doug Orchard, who made that film as well.
and so it goes through the good, bad, and the ugly of fasting and all of the different aspects and components to it, whether it's time restricted eating or multi-day or those sorts of things. And he also goes into, you know, it's really good for a lot of people, but there's also some possible negatives if you're someone who has maybe dealt with some eating disorders or dysfunctions in the past. You know, maybe time restricted eating or fasting is something that would just jumpstart those sort of habits or patterns again. So he goes through the good, the bad, and the ugly with it, which is really good with what he does. But yeah, I mean, once we watched that, we kind of, and I was also something with COVID and the way of the world. I said to Jimmy too, like, I think we should probably start like taking fasting and that sort of stuff a little bit more seriously. And, you know, who knows if we're going to get to a point in the world where we might have to go a few days in between feedings and stuff like that. So, you know, if there's one way we could prepare, we might not be going out and buying guns and ammo and that sort of stuff, but at least we know we can go a couple of days and not eat food. We might be in a good position one way.
No, man, the trick is you got to find a Connex container and bury it in a mountain somewhere and just fill it full of canned goods. You know, that's you don't have to worry about fasting.
I've thought about it. I haven't gone as far as like those dehydrated meals or any of
Yeah.
those sort of freedom companies or anything like that. But I've definitely pick up a canned good or two when they're on sale, or I see them in the grocery store, and I have a cupboard or two here that I've been stockpiling just in case. So
Do you guys fast currently?
I do.
Yeah,
I like to call it
time restricted eating.
Yeah, Rich kind of corrected me on that. And more time restricted feeds, but I usually just eat once a day at this point.
Cool.
Yeah.
Saw an Instagram guy. I just came across it on my like recommended thing. His name is Papa Swolio. I'd never seen him before.
That's a
Pretty
great
hilarious.
name.
He's got a good shtick. And I guess he's got like a bajillion followers too, but he's got a shirt that has a take on, Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, and it's gained off. And he says, "You shall not fast." And he's like this big bodybuilding. I thought that was great, but anyway.
Sounds like a Life is Prescribed shirt.
Right.
Yeah. Very similar vein.
Well, I guess since we're on this topic real quick, before we get back into the games and the programming and stuff, have you dabbled? Are you eating raw liver and testicles at this point? Do you get down with like
Not
that
on
at
that
all?
train.
Not on that.
Not
train?
really. I have a buddy in town. He runs a grass-fed beef company.
Okay.
Shout out to Hexed Quality Meats. And he has a really, really good beef and chorizo blend that he's worked on, where it's super palatable. It's kind of for like the lay person dipping their toe into the organ meats world, where you can just have a burger or you can have your chorizo in the morning. It tastes delicious. And oh, by the way, it's got heart and, spleen and liver and all that stuff in there. But he's played around with the ratios enough that it's still a significant part of the breakdown, but it's not so much that you take a bite and you're like, holy crap, what's this? That's about as far as I've gone.
Where are they based out of?
Nashville.
Okay, sweet. I'll have to check.
Yeah, Hext,
sure.
Hext Quality Meats.
We both get down with the ancestral food blend. I still can't get into just buying liver in itself, let alone eating it raw. So I definitely get
pretty
down
rugged.
Yeah,
a little beyond me.
No doubt.
Since we're on the topic and definitely want to get back to the program and the games and all of that, what is your daily nutrition look like?
Oh man. To be honest, this year, honestly, since I moved to Nashville, it's probably the least disciplined I've been with my lifestyle, maybe ever, like since high school. And I don't mean that in like a self-disparaging way. It's just kind of the reality of this time of my life. And recently my wife and I have kind of rededicated to getting back on it. And it's funny because like I say that, but I look at what off the rails is for me, and having a lifetime of pretty decent habits, off the rails is still pretty okay. Like it's not like I'm out of control with just junk food and this and that. It's just not very disciplined. And so it's kind of fun to see that in a way that even when I'm not taking it that seriously, like the baseline habits are there and have been ingrained enough that they're still pretty supportive of general health. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, these days, if we're talking like really recently, as of like the last week or two, it's been back on just kind of the meat and veggies train, making sure things are pretty, I don't even know what the word would be. It's not restrictive, but just focused around that really. Yeah, up until that point, my biggest, it's funny you guys bring up fasting. I think my biggest kind of detrimental habit is I just don't eat enough. And it's just one of those things where I get busy. I'm not thinking about it. Like I love breakfast. I'll wake up and have a big breakfast, and then I'll get busy with my day and I won't think twice about it. And then it's 8:00 at night and I'm like, oh, I should eat something else. And then it's a really big dinner. And it's just kind of this weird cycle of that. So for the level of activity I've got, and I mean, to be perfectly honest, the level of stress I had last year, like that was not a good strategy. So yeah, it's just getting a little bit more consistent. But yeah, meat and veggies. I mean, it's really, there's no secret formula as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't have to be that complicated.
Are you getting down with some barbecue in Nashville?
Oh yeah, have to.
You a brisket guy?
Dude, yes. I'm an equal opportunist when it comes to barbecue. I mean, to be perfectly frank, brisket is very, very good, but I'm not going to pass up a rib plate. You got some pulled pork, let's go. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I've always been a brisket guy, but now that I'm down here in South Carolina, the Carolinas are usually pork forward. So it's like smoking pig, and every barbecue I pass has like a pig in their logo, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
I mean, I'll do it, but I would definitely prefer like some brisket. But so back to the programming and that sort of stuff. You said you talked to some of your friends and kind of bounced off some ideas and whatnot. Was it something that you pulled from maybe some feedback, or ran some things by some people? I mean, I know you guys have like the testers and that sort of stuff, but was the responsibility, was it something that caused you mentioned you had some stress this last year and stuff like that. Was that an added stress to you, or was it more self-induced, knowing that you were the guy?
I think it was both. I mean, on the one hand, like, I'm always a little headier than I think I should be on certain things. Like I take things pretty seriously. I can't get them out of my brain sometimes. And, even past the point of utility, I think that's just who I am. And that's fine. The older I get, the more I'm more at peace with that. But, also there is the gravity of, like, it's a big event. It matters to a lot of people, matters to me. Certainly I've dedicated most of my adult life to the whole like CrossFit movement. So it was really important for me to do it justice. And so, yeah, there's a lot of pressure that came along with that. And it was one of those things where I did feel that there was some degree of having to ride a line a little bit, like I had my ideas and I had things that I wanted to do, but I also think that you do have to pay homage to what's come before you. And there's got to be a through line from where the thing started to where it's going. And it has to make sense. You can't just come in being handed the reins to something like that and have just a million ideas that are out of left field and don't make sense and don't connect anything before them. So, it was one of those questions of, I'm going to do me. I don't know how to do it any other way, but at the same time, it has to make sense. It has to have a clear history behind it that supports it. So trying to balance that rolled around in my head a lot in the lead up.
Okay. And with that being said, do you have say one particular, say, more traditional workout that you program for this edition, and maybe one sort of non-traditional or kind of that through line type of workout that really maybe stoked your bliss?
Yeah, for sure. I'll say the through line was the final event. It was a riff on a very classic CrossFit workout called Jackie. A lot of people that have done CrossFit are really familiar with that. So it's just like a beefed up version of a workout that goes on in affiliates around the world every day. So that was cool. And then one that was a little bit more out of the field, I guess. We did a sandbag clean ladder, and we've done a ton of barbell 1 rep max style events. We've done a bunch of elimination style lifting events, but we've never combined those elements in a way that athletes have been presented with something they've never had to lift before in that way. And so that was really cool. And it was really risky. It was a Saturday night event. It was a big showcase kind of deal. And it was something that, I don't know, man, it could have flopped. It could have been really boring, and it could have been really underwhelming. And we could have had a bunch of athletes that were not able to step up and do the task. And none of that happened. It was totally compelling. It was crazy the way people responded to it. And the athletes stepped up. I mean, they I won't say all of them, but many of them exceeded their own expectations in that event, which was really cool to see. And in my opinion, that was kind of like a really pure expression of what I think CrossFit is. The whole ethos is being prepared to be able to step in and do something, even if you can't prepare specifically for it. And that was exactly what happened in that event. You had a lot of athletes that in the warm-up area, they struggled with the weight. They didn't think they'd be able to do it. But when push came to shove and it was time to go, their level of preparation showed through and they all exceeded their expectations. So that was really, really cool to see that even though they didn't have faith in their own preparation sometimes, that it still mattered and it still came out in the end. So that was cool.
Yeah, it seemed like that was a fun event, and seemed like the crowd got into that and people were fired up, and there was definitely some big efforts from the athletes. And I always think you can't ever go wrong with some of those traditional, CrossFit workouts, whether they're in combination, like sometimes they've been, or just a beefed up version of it. But I think it's also, they're fun and popular because, like you said, there are people doing them all over the world in gyms. And so the average Joes can kind of relate to that. And really it puts it into perspective in terms of, okay, I've done something similar to this and it took me X time, and these guys are doing it beefed up and they just crushed me.
Yeah, it's pretty wild what the top of the heap can do these days. And just the range. I mean, that still blows my mind when you have these athletes that, they really can do it all. And it just, you open up the physiology textbook and it tells you shouldn't be able to have a singular athlete that can express all these things that well. And it's like, well, we got a whole field of them. It's really crazy. So it's fun to see. And I'll say one other thing that I'm proud of. I hesitate to use the word proud because I don't know. It's not quite right, but easy enough to say it. I was really proud of the way that the team and age group competitions came together and the way that they overlapped with the individuals in some sense. Like, I feel like this was one of the more integrated years where the team competitors and the age group competitors and the adaptive competitors, they all got a crack at some of the more unique elements. They got to kind of taste some of that flavor that the individuals so often get to play with. So that was a lot of fun to be able to kind of direct that a little bit. And bring those guys into some of that challenge that you can only get at an event like the CrossFit Games. It's not something that you can replicate necessarily at just like a local competition or a regional competition. So I was happy with the way that came together.
When it comes to those different categories, the team, the adaptive, and the age groups, how much of a difference is that when it comes into program consideration, RX? Is it pretty much like doing different like 3 other different competitions?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, because we learned this the hard way a little bit with the quarterfinals in 2021, which was a new stage of that the season at that time. And all of those divisions had kind of a riff off of the base programming that the individuals did. And they all kind of hated it. They were like, we want something unique, So we took that feedback and it was basically, hey, message received. Let's make sure that the different divisions get a bit of a different flavor. But at the same time, like I said, at the games, the individuals get confronted with so much unique stuff. And sometimes the teams and age groups at that stage don't. That it was fun to kind of see where we could overlap and it would make sense, but they would still have their own unique test overall. So like a great example was the parallel bars. The individuals got to use the parallel bars in an event, and so did the teams, and so did the age groupers, and so did the adaptive athletes. And they were similar events, but they were different enough that it made sense for the overall test for each one of those divisions. So looking for opportunities like that, where you're like, okay, we got this cool thing. How can we get everybody with their hands on it, but it's not just a carbon copy? That was a fun challenge. And I like stuff like that. It's kind of variations on a theme.
Yeah. And I think that's something that maybe the fan or the athlete doesn't think of, you guys having to program 3 different other separate competitions. And I think, it's interesting. You said you like to get heady and overthink of it and kind of have almost like a story structure of the workouts and one leading into another. And all right, we just did this, so we have to do this. So I think my question is, when you're planning all this out, do you have the board with the strings, and are you connecting certain things, and do you have to restructure certain events because this one doesn't lead into this one, or this is on day 1, it should be on day 2? How does that look? And like, how mad scientist does that get?
Oh, you nailed it. It's 100% mad scientist like that. And it is 100% interconnected. And so I use a digital program that's basically like an infinite whiteboard type of situation. It's really useful in the sense that you can just put up all these different ideas. You can start playing around with exactly what you talked about, where, okay, how do they connect? What does this look like over the course of a day? What if we move one thing to the next? How does that affect that day? How does it affect the competition overall? And I think that's one of the things that's tricky to balance, because on the one hand, you don't want the casual fan or the casual observer that just gets dropped into this event and is watching it. You don't want them to have to understand to that depth what's going on in order to enjoy it. You know, like it should be something that you can just step into and you're like, oh, this is cool. I understand at a base level what they're doing and how challenging it is. And I don't need to go beyond that necessarily. But for people that have been around a lot longer, people that have the interest in the sport, you know, that meat is on the bone. And if you choose to take a look at it, it's important that it's there. And for the legitimacy of the event, I think it's important that those things are taken into consideration. So yeah, I mean, if you were to look at my kind of mind map of the 2022 games, and you didn't have kind of a guide through that, it would look pretty chaotic. You know, there's a lot of danglers that don't necessarily get deleted and don't get cleaned up because they don't have to be. But they're a part of that process that kind of whittles away to the end state.
Was there anything that you weren't sure that was gonna hit that hit? Was there things that you thought were gonna hit that didn't? What do you think you did really well? What do you want to improve on?
Yeah, the Sandbag event was one that was like a big roll of the dice, like I said, and it ended up coming off great. You know, that was one that I think was a big win. We did this event early in the competition that was like a skill speed ladder where there were different elements each round that the athletes had to do. And they kind of had to progress through the first round and be good enough to get to the second round, which was harder. And then the third round had skills that maybe nobody had done in the field, but it was kind of who could adapt on the fly. And that one didn't play out quite as well as I'd hoped. There were a few people that made it all the way to the end, but it was pretty sparse. So, you know, that one was one that I think it was good to do it. But if I were to do it over again, I think I'd want to expose more people to more of those skills instead of making them have to progress and kind of earn it.
And with that said, is everything drawn out and planned out before the athletes even get there? Or is there, like we were talking about the formula and all that, is there a thing where like if X happens, then we do Y, but if Y happens, then we go to B, or is there anything that you're changing on the fly because of like maybe like one thing like completely wrecked everyone, or is it like, you know, there's no adjusting because of something like that?
Yeah. Well, this year we had the benefit of like a full testing week before we got to Madison. So we had a bunch of athletes that ran through all of the events. We got to kind of take stock of what their, what the impact was, you know, kind of as they worked through the week. And that gave us a lot of insight to put the final touches on a lot of things. So for the most part, it's pretty set by the time we get to the games. The exception are some of the more unique kind of site-specific events that happen. So for example, we had a first event, which was a biking event. And the concept was there. It was going to be a longer event. It was going to be more stamina based. It was going to have a bunch of kind of gymnastics elements paired with the bike. All of that was set, but the specific course, the distance, the you know, the exact details, the reps, things like that, we had to wait until we got on site, because with something like a bike event, you don't know the exact bike on that exact terrain on that exact course. You can guesstimate as far as how long it's going to take, but you don't know until you actually run it. So that was one where we had to get there. We had to throw some of our testing athletes and demo athletes at it, and then fill in the blanks a little bit based on this concept that we had that was solid. So I really enjoy that process too, where it's like, all right, we know exactly what we're shooting for conceptually. Once we get on site and we have all the pieces in place, how do you make the real thing match the concept? And that's, I think, one of those kind of cool things about the games where it turns out to be an event where you can't get that anywhere else. You know, you can replicate it, you can get close, but it is unique to that year and that event and that field of athletes. And I think that's cool.
Are you looking for feedback in real time? Are the athletes coming up to you be like, man, that was fucking awful, but I loved it? Or are you trying to like just stay focused on that stuff and maybe not take any of that sort of stuff in the moment during the competition?
During the competition, it's like the horse has kind of left the stable. You know what I mean? It's like there's only so much you can do there. And there's so much more that goes into running an event on that scale. Like, you know, you've got a broadcast, you've got a signage team that has to be in the right place at the right time. You've got equipment coming out, you got tight transitions, you got multi divisions that have to run on the same fields of play. And so once the competition starts, you know, if you're going to change something, it's got this huge ripple effect that you really got to make sure that it's worth changing to make that decision. That's like a kind of, you know, last ditch thing. So in a perfect world, you've done your homework ahead of time and you don't have to do that. But during the testing process, it's exactly what you mentioned for that reason. You know, you want to see, okay, what happens when these guys are midway through it? What happens when they're finished? What happens when they have to do something afterwards? How does all of this play off of each other? And that's what informs kind of the final plans. But once you're on site and once things have started, it's like it's a little too late. Well, it's not that it's too late. I shouldn't say that, because, you know, ultimately, if the decision is made, you know, you can change things. The whole team is there ready to support that, but there better be a damn good reason behind it, because it's got a lot of work that's tied to it. And you know, it's not that you're going to make a lot of people upset, but you're certainly going to make their lives a lot harder to start changing things on the fly. So doing your homework matters in that run up.
Having that testing week, I would think makes a world of difference. And I would think that obviously that's probably not something that just started, but throughout the years, things have changed. And hey, maybe we should test this. Maybe we should have this in play a couple months in advance. Kind of, you know, that was last minute, kind of you doing the games last year. What is kind of your long game plan, having a full year ahead of you? What does the games look like going forward? What's changing? It's constantly evolving. The sport of CrossFit is constantly evolving. CrossFit itself is constantly evolving. What's that look like going forward?
Yeah, the big picture is just having more time. You know, last year we were kind of sidelined with this whole change up early in the season. Things were already underway. I mean, we were right before the open when all of this stuff started coming down. And so there was a lot of wheels already in motion, which created a bit of a scramble. And so, you know, this year, having a little bit more clarity around what's happening and who's going to be responsible for it, it just gives us more time, to get ahead, which I think allows you to craft ideas better, which hopefully is going to result in better execution, better experience for the competitors, better experience for the fans. And just having that, like I said, the padding of time, you know, like that's the real luxury. So nothing really dramatically different other than a little bit more breathing room to try to get it right.
And mentioning the first time CrossFit paid you was in 2007, you know, obviously
Yep.
You were at Eric Gregg and saw everything that kind of happened in the past couple of years. What are your thoughts on CrossFit itself, how it's changed for the better, where it's going, and just kind of what the everyday looks like under the new regime?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, CrossFit, the idea, it's out in the wild. I don't think you can ever put that genie back in the bottle. And I don't think anybody can ever own that. That's, it's one of those things. It's like, man, it's there, it's out there. There's so many people doing it in so many different ways and expressing that across so many different platforms that, I mean, you can't stop that. You know what I mean? If the CrossFit, the entity, went away tomorrow, I don't think it would really matter much as far as the influence that kind of this mixed mode training has had on things. So in that way, it's kind of interesting and kind of liberating, because it's hard to articulate, but it's not that like my job doesn't matter or like the company doesn't matter. It certainly does. I think people need kind of a beacon and a leadership to kind of see things through. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, it's out there. You know, it's happening. People understand what it is. They're going to drive it forward. And I believe that that's the best way anyway. You have this grassroots buy-in, and people are going to take it and craft it and continue to refine it. And that's great, you know? So I really see CrossFit, the company, as stewards of the thing, and really just trying to get out of the way of the people that are doing it really, really well and provide examples of that and feed that back into the ecosystem, if that makes sense. And then obviously on the games front, you know, like we're responsible for running these big competitions that allow the people that want to take it seriously as a sport to express that aspect of it. And so that's a big responsibility. But the movement itself is one of those things where it's like, man, it's there. Like it's kind of a weird place to be. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but it's interesting to watch it, because you can wrap yourself up in it as much as you like, but at the end of the day, it's bigger than you, the individual.
Yeah, you know, we live in a world and a time where, for better or worse, everyone has an opinion on everything, whether they're well versed in it or not, and sometimes they just regurgitate things that they've heard that aren't necessarily factual, or people have invested in those things.
No, not on the internet. Come on. No way.
You know, and so I always, you know, feel obligated to kind of maybe not defend, but just give my opinion and stick up for the positive things that CrossFit has brought to my life, be it from the community or learning better movement patterns, and you know, as a high level athlete, changing my perspective on training and those sorts of things. You know, so I always give people some tips or things to look for if they say they're, you know, they're getting into CrossFit, or what should I look for. Do you have, you know, like maybe not like an elevator pitch, but when people ask you at this point, if there's someone new coming to you for, hey, wait, what should I look for in a box? What should I look for in a gym? Do you have like, you know, maybe 3, 4, 5, you know, kind of quick pointers that, you know, should let people know, you know, what's a really good quality facility versus maybe, you know, I think a lot of that, as Greg said, the cream will always rise to the top. And I think we've seen that over the last, you know, 5, 6 years. But do you have, you know, like I said, not an elevator pitch, but a couple key points that people should draw from or look for?
Oh man, I got thoughts all day. But yeah, I mean, the big one is it's got to feel right. I think that's one of the coolest things about the genie being out of the bottle, so to speak, is that you can go to any major city, almost anywhere in the world these days, and you can step into a single CrossFit gym and be like, yeah, wasn't really my flavor. You go a couple blocks over and you step into a different CrossFit gym and you're like, dude, I never want to leave. This is the coolest thing ever. And so I don't think that necessarily means the first one you stepped into was bad. It just wasn't the right fit for you. And it was probably the right fit for somebody else. And that's fine. And I think that's really, really cool that you can have this base level of appreciation for developing your physical self across a broad range of activities that gets expressed for, in one way, you've got like a straight laced gym where everybody there is a professional. They're lawyers and bankers or whatever, and they love getting in there and getting it done. And you go down the block and you got like a bunch of weirdo fitness misfits like me and others that never really had a legitimate sporting background, but fell in love with this thing. And now we can't get it out of our lives, you know, even if we tried. And so, you know, it's a rambly way to say that you got to make it feel right. Or you don't have to make it feel right, but it should feel right. And if it doesn't, shop around a little bit, because there's lots of places doing it in lots of different ways. So that's number one. It's got to feel right. Got to feel like the community is there to support you, and it feels like a spot that you want to spend time in. Because if you don't want to spend time there, that's just one more hurdle to getting in and getting it done. And then number two, you know, I think from the more technical side, don't be swayed by fancy equipment or, you know, really nice facility. Those are nice to haves, but they certainly don't make or break a program. Look towards the care that the coaching staff puts into their members. Look towards the attention to detail that they have for the basics. Look towards how they treat people that are beginners and are, you know, just getting their feet underneath them. If those are in check and that's a genuine concern of the staff that is present at that facility, it's probably a pretty good place to stick around. So yeah, it's got to feel right. And the staff and the coaches have to make you feel like you really matter when you're there.
Yeah. I always say too, to piggyback off of that, if you walk in and you have to look for someone to introduce yourself to, then that might not, I'm sure it might be different now, but that was always kind of my barometer of like, if I have to introduce myself to people and people aren't coming up to me, that's probably not a community that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, I like that. We used to have this it wasn't a rule because we didn't have a lot of rules really, but this when I was coaching at San Francisco CrossFit, it was pretty loose. It was an outdoor facility. It was, it's early days. But we did have a culture where it was expected that if you had people that you didn't know in the class, you would go over and introduce yourself and shake hands. That was just accepted practice. And that was not just from the staff, but that was an expectation that we put on our members just culturally. It was like, hey man, no, this is a place that, like, if somebody has the nuts to get here, out in the cold in a parking lot at the edge of San Francisco, if they found us and they like want to be here, let them in and let's see what happens. Because it's hard enough, it's hard enough to get over those hurdles. It's hard enough to show up and beat yourself up and, try to do the thing. Don't make it harder by being standoffish or whatever.
Yeah. You've been around the world for CrossFit. Is there still facilities like that OG San Francisco CrossFit that still exists?
Oh yeah. There's so many. I mean, there's still people doing it in their garage, carving out space where none exists, small scale, cobbled together equipment. All of that stuff still happens all over the place. And again, that's kind of the crazy thing, is you have the other end of that where you have a really polished mega facility that's custom built and 10,000 square feet and top of the line equipment. And it's cool that both can exist under the same umbrella program. One, like I said, I don't believe one is better than the other. It's just what's the flavor that sticks for you and what's going to facilitate you getting in the door and being fired up to do it.
Yeah, that was like one of my favorite parts about the old school journal, was when they would visit some of the boxes, and even the people that started with home gyms. And there was, I think it was in Tennessee, there was an older gentleman and maybe his wife, and they had like, it was almost like a barn in Tennessee that was kind of like an outdoor facility. And it was like, Jimmy and I used to geek out on those videos all the time.
Dude, the Blair Morrison at Red Rocks, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I wanted to go to Red Rocks because of that video. Like those, and just to kind of get in the weeds, but those journal videos for me, because we grew up at the shore, so everyone was into surfing and skating videos. To me, those journal videos was that for us CrossFit geeks. Like, it hit the spot, man.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's the same thing, right? Like, you've got your kind of mega stars in any scene that start to emerge, but that doesn't mean that you as the individual can't get fired up and get involved. And I think that's what that speaks to. Like those, I remember those old journal articles from like 2004, maybe even earlier, where they would explore the garage gym. And it was such I don't know, man, I still get funny thinking about it, where it really was like a cutting away of all of the bloat. It's like, okay, what do you really need to get fit? And when you get right down to it, I mean, the stuff that you need to have versus the stuff that's nice to have, the list of need to have is pretty small. Yeah, you really don't need much stuff to get really, really fit and really, really good at a lot of things. You need a little creativity. You need the desire to do it. But at the end of the day, it's like, man, there's not a lot of physical requirements as far as gear is concerned. And I think that's so cool.
Well, I think you made a really good point about saying the genie being out of the bottle. And I think one of the greatest gifts and the knowledge that I got from CrossFit and just physical culture and trying to advance myself as an athlete, as a coach, is the freedom to know that, like you said, I could be in a closet and I could get a workout in and I'm going to be good. And I think that, like, as a human, like we were talking about the Doug Lurchard film before, the what the hell is it called? Yeah, the Motivation Factor. Like, have physical culture and your ability to kind of move your body, like that's some like personal freedom stuff that I don't think is as put on big of a pedestal as it should be in our culture. But I think that's like, man, if you have the personal sovereignty to make yourself work out every day, that you're winning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like, that's, for me, the long-term motivation is all about that. It's like, hey man, it really is just physical freedom. Like, that's the best shot that you've got You have these kind of big dials that you can manipulate. Nobody else is responsible for them. You got exercise over here. You got what goes in your face over here. And maybe as a third one, you got like what time you go to bed at night. Like those are kind of the big three. And once you realize that you're the only one that can really dictate what happens on those three things and the outputs that are possible with just manipulating those three things, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, like I'm not old, but I'm not young anymore either. I'm 39 in, what day is it? Maybe next week. My birthday's
Happy
coming
birthday.
up. Hey, thanks. Yeah. And the point is that like, I never hesitate at 39 to go and do whatever I want physically. And when my friends come to me and they say, hey, we're going to go do X, and I've never done X before, I'm like, yeah, let's go. I don't have to think twice about it, and that's pretty awesome. I look around at peers of mine in the same age range that don't have that same mentality and haven't really taken care of themselves. And it's like, that's not the case for many, many people. And again, like no judgment, everybody's got their own life to lead. That's fine. But man, for me, it's like, it's just, I can't get over how cool it is to be able to say yes continually to whatever, like, yeah, am I going to take up jujitsu at 36? Yes, I am. And I don't have to think twice about it. You know what I mean? Am I going to go? My buddy had one of those e-foil electric surfboard things. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
They're awesome. And he's like, hey, you want to come try it out? I'm like, yes, I do. Am I a terrible swimmer? Yes. But am I fit enough that I can pull myself out if I have to? Yep. You know what I mean? It's the best part about all of it, in my opinion.
Buzz, you have a way of just saying things that just make it so, like, that three knobs analogy is just, I'm going to use that. Like, you got three knobs and you're the only one that can turn them. And another Boz quote that I absolutely love, and I'm going to botch this one, but you said something like, they ask you like what you like to do in your free time, and you're like, if I have time to waste, I like to waste it. So if I have
it's
time,
still the best.
I'm gonna. That's like, because there's like been a large part of my life that's all I wanted to do is waste time. So I feel that.
What a luxury, right? I mean, it's like, man, there's so many externalities that creep their way in that when you got the time to waste, it's like, man, I feel like I'm getting away with something. It's awesome.
Jim, I thought you were going to say what he said. Every day is a good day to slick back.
Hair slicks back, dude. I think about that every time.
Did I say that?
Hair back. Yes. That's like, I live my life by that, dog.
Oh, good. Yeah, me too these days. Although, man, I'll tell you, back to what we were talking about earlier with the South being so sticky. I had this thought the other day. I'm like, it's time to shave it all off again.
Yeah, I definitely shaved different things at different times, be it my beard or my hair, my head, because of the barbershops being shut down and that sort of stuff. And I just like, it got to a point where you get a couple 100-degree days in the Mile High City, and you're like, I got to get this thing off my face, or I got to get this mop off my head. I need some freedom. Boz, you mentioned, you can get fit very simply with a few choice pieces, and even more so just with calisthenics and moving your body through space and time. But if you had a short list, maybe 3 items to take with you on a deserted island, what would those be? And has that changed since you first started back in like 07-ish?
Yeah, my list, I think, changes all the time, in the sense that I think if you're going to engage in anything long-term, in this case, like general fitness, you're going to kind of fall in love and out of love with certain elements over and over and over again. Like you're going to go through periods of time where you're like, man, it's all about the barbell. Everybody should be doing the barbell. I love the barbell. And then you go through periods where you're like, meh, I don't know if I love the barbell, So I think my list has changed a lot, but like where I am currently, I'm kind of back to, in many ways, like where I started. And when I was really younger, like just out of high school, not even in college yet, I built my own kettlebells, and I built them out of concrete and an old basketball. And I got this heavy grade heater hose that I would sink in there. And like I made my dad a pair for Father's Day one year. And I'm sure he was not stoked at all, because he's like, "What? Thanks, I guess. But what is this?
Work out now?"
He uses it as a doorstop to this day.
Probably. He's moved a few times since then, so I think they probably like found their way out of his house. Which, hey, no problem there, Dad. No love lost. But I think a kettlebell is a great tool. I just think they're a little bit more fun than a dumbbell. I don't think they're necessarily have greater utility, but I think they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of variety that you can use with something like that. It gives you a nice like external load, and in combination with all the stuff that you can do with just your own body weight, I think it's a really nice complement. So if that's like gun to my head, desert island type of stuff, I would say a kettlebell is on the list. And I don't even know what else would be there, to be perfectly honest.
Are you still doing jiu-jitsu in Nashville?
Yeah, I took a bit of a probably 2-month hiatus during the most intense ramp up to the games, and then during the games. But yeah, I went and trained yesterday. So yeah, still in it. Took my licks, haven't been out of the gym for a couple of weeks, getting back in. It's like, okay, here we go. But that's part of it. It's fun.
Do you have a preference with the gi or no gi?
I like the gi because I'm an old man, and
slow,
not as athletic as I used to be. Yeah, exactly. I got to have something to hold on to. But no, I like all of it. But yeah, given my choice, I'll train more in the gi.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, my favorite style is just shit talk. That's the most, that's the most fun thing.
Verbal jujitsu.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because like I'm not that great. Like I have a good time, and I got a couple of go-to techniques, but I'm not that great. And my fitness gets me through a lot, which is nice. But dude, I love talking shit when people are clearly better than me. Oh, it's so fun. It's yeah.
Have you looked into catch wrestling at all? You look like with your your tattoos and stuff, you would fit right into like a good
Carl
catch wrestling scene.
He's the man.
Let's go.
I love all of that stuff. I way back in the day, actually, this is like 2005 and 6 probably. I did a little bit of sambo in the Bay Area. There's one guy, Serge.
Shannon?
What's that?
Jake Shannon?
No. This might be before that was available, but there was a guy named Serge Gerlach. Shout out Serge. He's still there in Tiburon, California. And he had trained a lot of sambo, and he had a wood shop that we would go to in Marin, and we would push all the heavy machinery out of the way. We'd lay down some zebra mats. We put on a kurtka, which is like the sambo gi top, and we would just chuck each other around. And we do that a couple of times a week, and it was a blast. And then I started working full time with CrossFit, and I was on the road, and I had to, kind of prioritize my time, and that wasn't it. So I hadn't done anything like that in years and years and years. And then flash forward to 2019, I started jiu-jitsu. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in like early kind of proto MMA and, the catch wrestling offshoots that come with that, and all the kind of weird and wonderful overlaps with pro wrestling in Japan and stuff like that. Like I could talk about all that stuff for days. It's awesome.
You're in the right place.
Yeah. And I love you mentioned like training in the wood shop, because I think it's just awesome the crazy locations that fitness has taken us. We talk about CrossFit San Francisco and that being in the boatyard, and I've trained in tin shacks or places that you look like you need a tetanus shot after you train, and it's just like that grittiness. And I have like stuff that comes up in my Facebook as memories, and I see pictures from the CrossFit days or the jiu-jitsu days, and it's like those are the days like that get me through today. And it's like when stuff's hard today, you just think about those gritty gyms or being in a tin shack. Like, yeah, it's not that bad right now.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's just, how cool is that? I think it's a testament that like money can't buy culture, money can't buy heart, money can't buy some of those most important. It's cliche, but like, it only gets you so far to have a nice facility. That's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. And hey, man, power to you. If you got the biggest and the best of everything, awesome. But it's no substitute for that will. And it's no substitute for fostering that will in the people that want to show up for it. And I think that's really where the magic happens, in any endeavor. You see that time and time again. I mean, how many times do you see that in the Olympics? It's like, that's the story so often, where you have this powerhouse where it's like, well, they have the best, of everything. This program is generations deep. And then you get some scrappy upstart that comes in and just upsets the whole thing. Like that happens all the time in the sporting world. Maybe not every time, but it's not uncommon. And I think it's a testament to all of those good things, all of those healthy things that competition can start to unearth,
Yeah, that's why we tune in, keep coming back
Yep,
to tune in.
exactly. That's why you run the race, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If we just put the results on paper the way they were supposed to be according to
Yep.
rankings or whatever, then we wouldn't tune in, but we tune in because of those upsets or that oh my god knockout of Leon Edwards, taking off Usman's head when he was
Dude.
down 4 rounds to none. And
I'd ridden that fight off. I was like, well, basically start heading home, I guess. And then, oh my god.
Yeah,
that was wild.
Knowing your love of the kettlebell and your interest in combat sports and your jiu-jitsu and sambo background, have you ever swung around a Bulgarian bag?
Very limited, just a little bit here and there. But it's fun, but nothing like serious. And I never had anybody really like show me the ropes. It was more like, oh, there's one here, cool. I'm gonna fudge my way through it a little bit, and that's about it,
Okay.
And actually, I have a in a similar vein. One thing that I'm kind of surprised I never got more into, at least like on an experimental level, was like the club bells and stuff like that. Like I've always kind of had a lot of, in the Venn diagram, I've got a lot of overlap with, groups that would have introduced me to that. But I just never have. I actually have one in my garage right now that a buddy left there, and like same thing. I'll pick it up and kind of like, I don't know, fart around with it every once in a while, but nothing serious. But I should. That stuff's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That's talking about the clubs and the different cultures and stuff. I find myself lately going down like a deep dive on some of the physical culture. And, you mentioned each country or each culture has like their own style of wrestling. And I've been fascinated by a lot of the stuff coming out that's been around in India for, hundreds, if not thousands of years with their wrestling traditions and some of the, kind of like the Hindu burpee and some of the Hindu squats and push-ups and just their clubs. And, they roll around in the sand and they're like rubbing mud in their hair. And, they have to, it's like a religion, you know what I mean? It's a true martial art. I'm trying to incorporate some of that stuff into what I'm doing with the wrestling program that I'm building down here. And just, I find it super, super fun, and just, it's good to mix it up and do different things. And it's always a challenge where you, like you said, the barbell is great until it's not. And then it's like, well, here's some Hindu squats and these are fucking really hard and I don't have any weight on them. And I don't know how
what do they call, is it the dand? Was that what they used to call it? There was 2 words. It was like the dand and something else. They were like the staples of the Indian wrestling. I can't remember. Man, it's been a while since I've thought about some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell? Am I like totally?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's the burpee is called, like a sapate, I think it is. And it's just kind of like, you're doing a Hindu squat and then you kind of flow right into a Hindu push-up as opposed to like your strict kind of squat, push-up, jump kind of thing. It's super interesting. And I saw one the other day where this guy was doing like sort of like a Hindu push-up, but then he was doing like a break dance, almost like leg spin, and I was like repping him out. And I was like, man, I got to learn how to do this so I could teach the kids how to do this.
Yeah, isn't that fun? And I mean, isn't it cool to be living at a time where you can see something like that in your pocket? Yeah. And you're inspired enough to like, oh, I got to give that a shot. you know,
I was doing it in my living room the other night, trying at least.
I do that all the time.
Yeah. You're Canadian. You've spent time in San Francisco. I believe you lived overseas. You're living in Nashville. Do you have a favorite place? Do you draw from all of those places? Is Nashville the forever home?
Oh, that's a good question. Hold on one second. My microphone just blasted my headphones here on high volume, and I can't figure out how to turn it down. Just a second. I'm going to have to deal with it. I guess the short answer is like, how could you not draw from your experience of life? And like I've had the good fortune of being able to live a lot of different places, travel a lot of places, meet a lot of people. So yeah, I think that's obviously an influence. As far as, is that conscious? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I look to a particular place and say, okay, I'm going to try to draw from that particular time of my life or that place in my life. But yeah, I mean, I think it's in the mix, no question.
Do you get nostalgic?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in a specific way. What do you mean?
Well, like, so I just moved here, and this seems to me, I tell the people from back home, it reminds me of like this area of southern New Jersey called the Pine Barrens, because like the trails are very similar, where it's like a combination of clay and sand. You know, sometimes I hear certain birds chirping in the morning that remind me of different locations. So, you know, and then there's also times where when I was in Colorado or different places where I would envision being in the Muir Woods or running on the Dipsy Trail and that sort of stuff. So like it's just little things like that just kind of make me nostalgic of different times. Or like we were talking about, you know, you romanticize about like that dirty, stinky gym where you thought you were going to get tetanus in, or at the time you were just like, all right, the situation is what the situation is. But then looking back on it, you're like, oh my God, that was like the greatest time ever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess recently I spend most of my life on the West Coast and I don't live there anymore. And so I do feel my mind kind of wanders towards that geography a little bit, like pine trees and mountains that meet the water and things like that. But it's more of like in a mind wandering kind of way. So I guess that probably is nostalgia. So yes, I guess the answer is yes.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm the same way as you, Boz, is like taking all of my experiences with me. There's a something corporate line in one of their songs. It's about like, oh, I once knew a girl that kept tattoos of all the homes she lived in, and that's kind of how I am. I'm like nostalgic with the house numbers I've lived in. Like those are probably something I'll get all of them tattooed on me at some point. But that's kind of how like the Nate Diaz rep the 209. I rep the house numbers I've lived in, so I totally vibe with that. So we got some rapid fire questions for you. Curious what has changed, if anything. So first one is, you currently drinking coffee? You're a coffee
Yes.
drinker. How do you take your coffee and how do you brew it?
I either use the AeroPress in my kitchen or I walk around the block to this place that is ironically called Weak Coffee, which I think is great. And I get a latte because I'm fancy like that.
Are you doing whole milk or skim
Oh, yeah.
milk or oat milk?
Whole milk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. Are you getting beans from them too when you do your AeroPress, or do you have a West Coast connect?
No, I'm not fancy when it comes to that sort of thing, so I'll take what I can get. But they have a lot of great stuff at Weak. So yeah, shout out Weak.
Shout out Weak Coffee. A lot of shout outs on this one. Usually we're the ones shouting out, but Boz is we got meat, we got coffee,
Boz
we got
reps, dog.
Sambo.
What else you need?
The homies.
The obscure homies. They're the best kind.
They are the best kind. They
The
usually have
only
the
kind.
best candy too.
Yep, absolutely.
Adrian, do you have a daily practice or ritual that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of yourself?
You know, sadly, right now I do not, and that's one thing that I need a little bit more of in my life is a little bit more consistency. I've gone through periods of time where I have, and I've felt a lot better about certain things, and currently I'm freewheeling a little bit too much. So it's something I'd like to get back to.
Right on. Respect.
So I've been waiting to ask this one because the last time you came on, you dropped the OCs and Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, and I had periods with both those bands, more Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats. Like, man, you put them on, I'll listen to them all day. So
yes,
what are you listening to right now? Audiobooks, podcasts, reading anything, and music, of course.
Oh boy. You know, these days, music's still big deal. I mean, I got the record collection going here. I've got a playlist going with some of my Nashville buddies, and we all have very, very different tastes. And I think that's a lot of fun because we have this just like shared Spotify thing that is just a total mess in the best possible way. A lot of Ghostface Killah. I've been listening to a lot of Ghostface lately. Dude, this album, particularly Sour Soul, that he released with a Canadian, I don't even know what you call them, new jazz maybe. They're called Bad Bad Not Good. and they did a collaboration called Sour Soul. Top to bottom, incredible. Heavy rotation. Check it out.
All right.
Is that new?
No, it's
It's old.
2015 or 16, I think. So not like old, but not new either.
Okay. You reading anything?
No, not really. Again, that was one of those things that I did a lot when I was doing the 75 hard at the beginning of the year. And then I fell off hard. I haven't read much lately. That's one of the things I want to get back to. I feel better when I have like a little bit of reading every day.
You've been busy. We'll give you a pass.
That's excuses. That's excuses.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was the last time, but this is always something we close out. Obviously, when we started this, it had a much more lighthearted appeal to it. Some people shy away from it, but maybe when you're in a rabbit hole late at night, do you ever find yourself something that interests you? Do you have a favorite conspiracy theory? Have you seen Bigfoot in the Smoky Mountains?
Have
you been to the Smokies?
I have been to the Smokies. I have not seen Bigfoot there. I think I was more likely to see Bigfoot around the Santa Cruz Mountains. There's actually a Bigfoot Discovery Center not too far from the CrossFit office. The place is awesome and a lot of fun. But no, my two current favorite conspiracy theories, they're a little political. So, some people might get a little up in arms about them, but so be it. They're no fun anyway. Number one, favorite conspiracy theory is that Michelle Obama is actually a man.
Yes. And that's have you seen the Ellen DeGeneres video?
No, I haven't.
Oh, dude, you got to look that one up when you get done.
Okay, I will. That'll be first task. So that's a fun one. And then there was right around the time of the 2020 election, there was this whole conspiracy belief that Trump was actually still the president and he was operating behind the scenes, and it was in fact Shadow Prez who was calling the shots. And I thought that was so great. Shadow Prez.
There's still people that are still waiting for that. So
oh yeah 100% for sure. But yeah, so Michelle Obama is actually a man and Shadow Prez is pulling the strings. Those are my two current favorites.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, check that. It's she dances on Ellen DeGeneres. There'll probably be some slow motion where you have to check some things out, but there's some people would say that is clearly proof. Others may say not. I got another one for you, since you I know you
bring it.
Spent a good amount of time in San Francisco. There's a thing called and it's kind of all inclusive and covers a lot of different areas, but there's a thing called Tartaria. And it's basically and it ties into this thing called the mud flood. And so there are people that theorize that there was a grand worldwide civilization at one time that was very peaceful, and they were on a higher level, and they used free energy, ether, all this stuff, and they've built all these different things. And at some point in time, there was some sort of maybe like cataclysmic energy sort of thing that happened. Maybe it was overloaded, and it caused liquefaction and basically turned a lot of, if not all of the earth, but different locations of the earth into liquid. And that's what they believe, something like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, what caused something like that. But there is a belief that according to the timeline, that the city of San Francisco was already there before the gold rush, and these people, these inheritors, inherited San Francisco, and the timeline of when the city was built doesn't match up, and that the Great Fire and that the earthquake was a story that was created to cover up this sort of cataclysmic event. And that's why if you look at some of the pictures of some of the buildings that are like on angles, and their foundation just doesn't match up, and there's like windows that are half buried under the soil and that sort of stuff. But one of the areas that they focus on with this is San Francisco, and another area was the I think it's like the 1905 San Francisco World Exposition, the World's Fair, and they say that was also like a cover up. So you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, since you live there, you might find some of the locations and that sort of stuff. I find that sort of stuff fascinating, and it was a good distraction with all the other stuff that was going on in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, far out. That's I've heard that a lot. Actually, in a few places that I've lived where there's, I don't know what you call it, the nexus of a certain type of calling or whatever that seems to create a city or a circumstance that people are drawn to. So there you go. What was the name of that again?
It's called Tataria. It was
Mud flood.
Okay.
It was a worldwide civilization that they believe was
Shipping.
in like Russia, China area. And there's actually still a place in Russia where the Tartars live. It's called Tatarstan. And so they believe that this was like this worldwide civilization. And so they think, one of the things that people focus on too in the United States is like a lot of the Capitol buildings in all of the states have a very similar like onion dome kind of architecture to it. And they think that had to do with like free energy, and a lot of the cathedrals they think were like sound healing centers where people went there to get the organs, and that sort of stuff was stuff that would heal people. And so it's like this kind of, it's like a lot of what Graham Hancock says, but it takes, that whole kind of we are living with amnesia thing to like a whole nother level of like, edibles on acid, eating some mushrooms, kind of like way out there kind of thought process. But I just find it fascinating, they're like, everything was horse and buggies and dirt roads, but yet we have these amazing, buildings that we are incapable of building in our modern technology and infrastructure and stuff.
Free energy now.
That's right.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Thanks again, sir.
Dude, my pleasure.
Love catching up with you. Love following
Likewise.
you, seeing what you got going on. Love that you're always holding it down and epic as fuck. So thanks so much, boss.
I appreciate the support, and thanks for having me on. It was a real breath of fresh air when you reached out to me, Jimmy. I was like, dude, yes, I haven't talked to those guys in forever. So yeah, stoked to do it.
Boz, where do you want us to direct people? If you want them to find you, where would you like us to send them?
I have a podcast with Pat Sherwood and myself that's hosted by Beyond the Whiteboard. And we talk very pragmatically about CrossFit and how to do CrossFit and how to keep it real with CrossFit. And there's not a lot of bells and whistles to it. So check that out. It's called Varied Not Random. That's a lot of fun. And I do have an Instagram account. I don't do much with it, but people can check that out. And from time to time, I'll throw some stuff up on there, but that's about it.
Right on. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes for you. And like Jimmy said, it's always cool to rock out with awesome, epic people that are doing awesome, epic stuff. And we've been big fans for a long time, all the way back to those old school days of San Francisco CrossFit. And yeah, it's always fun to reminisce and think about when people used to just wear board shorts and Chuck Taylors or Vans.
And just go for it. Yeah.
Just send it.
Yep. Well, thanks for having me again, guys. And man, Rich, if you guys are, if you ever head west a little bit, come to Tennessee,
I'll
come
be
hang
in
out,
touch
man.
for sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. That was on my list. It was one or the other, and it just so happened that the opportunity and the universe called me down here, but I'm not too far away, and definitely want to get over there and explore the Smokies and maybe go take in some live music too. So
Dude,
I'll definitely let you know when I'm coming.
Please do.
All right, brother.
You have a good night. Take care
You
of
too,
yourself,
guys.
sir.
All righty. We'll see you around, I'm sure.
Boss.
Thank
All
you.
right. See ya. Yeah, it's interesting because, CrossFit, the idea, it's out in the wild. I don't think you can ever put that genie back in the bottle.